Aron, on the stage. And back to the chat. Now, Aron and Troy, there we go. Got everybody on the stage. All right. Well, thanks, everyone. We're going to get live here on LinkedIn real quick, and then we're going to get started.
Perfect.
So it's going to take us just a second here. All right, everyone. Welcome once again to the Exit Your Way Business Roundtable. We're here every other Thursday talking about things that can help business owners prepare for their future, whatever that future may hold. So I'm happy today. We're going to be talking about pre-exit wealth planning for business owners. And we've got two friends of ours. First of all, I'm your host, one of your hosts, Damon Pistolka, with my partner in crime, brother, Andrew Cross, with me here today. And with us, we've got some special people here that we consider are very good in their industry, and that is Aron Marberg, Troy Niehaus. You guys are from Wealth Planners. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Work with Bernstein. I will let you guys introduce yourselves, and we will get going. Oh, you're on mute.
Troy, you're on mute, buddy.
Sometimes we have to test this thing out. No, I was going to say thank you so much. Listen, Aron and I both work at Alliance Bernstein, and we are with the private wealth group at Bernstein. And, you know, we focus our practice on working with business owners and entrepreneurs and very senior corporate executives. I'd say that's where we spend the bulk of our time. We have very similar practices. And it's just great to be able to jump on here and share the kind of experiences that we've had in working with business owners. We try to meet them really early, so to help them, you know, grow and become successful, and then think about some kind of an exit or taking their company public. So it's great to have both of us here and be on board with you. So thanks for having us.
Yeah,
Aron, what are you going to add to that? You got to add something different.
Well, I'm the guy that knows how to use the mute button as a starting point. So, no, but I mean, look, you nailed it, right? Yeah, like I said, work with business owners and like to work with folks early, right? There's a lot of resources we have at our disposal to be able to help business owners throughout the life cycle of their company, whether it's leveraging just intel we have around research to industry-specific data, thematic data within industries. We actually have a lending arm that lends capital to businesses. And then a lot of what we'll talk about today, planning for an eventual exit from a business. And we spend a lot of time with a lot of the entrepreneurs that we work with planning for that exit well in advance of the actual event, because you can actually add value to the deal by pulling different levers from a planning perspective well in advance of that actual transaction coming to fruition.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And that's why
I wasn't aware of the lending arm portion. We'll have to talk about later on, Aron. That's
I was writing that one down too. So that's good to know. So first of all, you guys probably have to do your disclaimers, you know, what you say is your opinion and all that good stuff, if we need to do that.
Well, yeah, you know it is, right? We work with the securities market. So they'll say is, yeah, it's everything that we say is always subject to it depends, right?
Yeah.
There's no guarantees, but yeah, nevertheless, a lot of good planning. And by the way, a lot of what we'll talk about too from a planning standpoint, I'll add the it depends caveat to like we think about tax strategy, because we know that's like the most incredibly fluid situation in the world right now. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. Beyond that compliance part, you know, we are not attorneys, we're not tax accountants, but we'll give advice around those types of strategies that need to be looked at for business owners. And so, you know, a lot of times we're doing upfront work prior to someone, you know, taking the advice that we give to their attorney or to their tax accountant. So it's a nice way to help maybe streamline some of that cost, because they're going to charge by the hour. We don't.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you guys have seen it many times over, many different situations. And that's the real benefit of working with true wealth planners. in the right size range. Because I think that's one of the things that business owners don't really understand, is that there are different types of wealth planners, just like there are different kinds of businesses. You've got a small business that's a solopreneur business. You've got a business that has maybe 50 or less employees. You've got businesses that are 50 to say 200 employees, and you've got 500 plus employee businesses, if we're measuring them that way. And I think what a lot of people don't understand is there are appropriate wealth planners for those stages as well.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about wealth planning, and now this is not for the solopreneur typically, but it can help, obviously. But when you're looking at this, really one of the things, and Andrew, you can elaborate on this, is one of the most important questions I think business owners really need to answer well ahead of the transaction is, can I live off the assets I've accumulated after the transact or going forward? Whatever I'm going to do, doesn't really matter if I'm 42 years old and I'm going to start another business, I'm whatever age and I don't want to work anymore. I think that's the big question, and that's the hesitancy, and that's where we really run into challenges with business owners exiting. If they're not confident in that question, they haven't answered that question well, they really struggle with it. Should I?
Well, one of the things about what Aron said though too is it's going to keep coming back. It depends. You know,
it's funny you say that. So we have a dedicated research team, about 40 or 50 people, called our Wealth Strategies Group, and a lot of them are former CPAs, former attorneys. I mean, they dedicate all of their time to either building analytical systems or publishing research around how to help people navigate the complexities of wealth. And the evergreen joke is that you ask them any questions and their answer is always starts with, it depends. But it's true, right? Because everything that they discuss is so fluid. Everybody's situation is so unique. But I would argue that one of the fundamental frameworks of what they put together is kind of what you were just talking about, Damon, and that is helping people understand what they actually need before an exit, like what that actual number is. We've built a framework and a system for stress testing that's called Core Capital, where it helps somebody understand what is the pool of capital that they need, assuming the markets are terrible, inflation runs high, and you live a long time. And if you're going to be okay under those three headwinds, now you know what that number is. And if you can start to plan for that number early, that sets you up for success in basically every other facet of your planning.
Yeah, it was this real life experience, working with these guys and Aron with a real client on this kind of thing. I was really impressed with how deep they went into, not just into wealth maximization, or we can do this with that, and we can get you there, but with the client going, with the business owner going into what do you really want to do? That's the depends part too. And I don't think they often, starting early is extremely important, because I don't think they're busy working, building a business. The exit's rapidly approaching, but I don't think they've given a lot of thought to that. And that's where we run into trouble, getting a deal done, because they get to the end there at closing, and then, it sure seemed like a big number at the beginning, but then I forgot I got one more kid I got to get through college. I've got an ex-wife, and I got some alimony I got to take care of, and then boom, it's taxes they're taking out a bunch, and I can tell now.
And even at the higher end of that, I mean, people like to, there's times you're setting up foundations, you want to set up, different ways to transfer that wealth to the next generation and multiple generations. I mean, there's so much of this that you really need to understand, that when you look at this, and you guys talk about taxes a lot. I mean, if you take your time and do this right ahead of the transaction, you can mitigate a lot of tax consequences. You can educate your next generations much better and things like that. Correct?
Yeah, for sure. I think the other thing, though, to keep in mind that business owners often struggle with, that I've seen, is they're used to spending whatever money the business generates.
Yeah.
So I can't tell you how many owners I've talked to, and it's generating $1 million worth of income, and so they're spending and they're spending and they're spending, and then they decide to sell their business. And of course, every transaction varies. I mean, we've worked, hundreds of millions of dollars of a sale of a business to something as simple as, an $8 or a $10 million sale. And I can't tell you how many times the people who, are closer to the $8 or the $10 million sale think that they're going to be able to continue spending the way they've been spending the last 10 years with their business, because they're just, spending that money that the income from the business generates. And guess what? That $8 or $10 million is not going to ensure that same lifestyle that they've been used to. And so that is also one of the biggest things that I've seen.
Yeah, well, I think you're absolutely right. And no matter how many times we talk to them about that, the reality that when that cash flow from the business, the day of closing, it stops. It completely stops. And that is a traumatic experience. Yes, you're sitting on a pile of cash, but and somewhat of a windfall, but you're still looking ahead 20, 25 years, maybe of life, maybe 30. And, that panic mode starts in. So how do you learn to manage that money or live off of that? And best be asking those questions.
You had something, Aron?
Yeah, I was just going to say that, the flip side of that is also true, where you do see a lot of people as well, that, they might have a company that's, valued at $40 million, but they haven't gone through that process of understanding what their number is. And they may need 20, right? But they're holding on because they actually don't know that they need 20, and they just keep working and pushing. And anyway, it all starts with this idea of understanding what that number is, because that gives you all the framework for, if you can move forward, when you can move forward. And by the way, also, by definition, if you know what someone's core capital is, you know what their surplus capital is. And that's when you start to also dig into a lot of those different planning tools, philanthropic vehicles, multi-generational wealth transfer things. And again, planning ahead with those particular, around those particular issues can save a lot in taxes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I think it's really in your core capital, the model and looking at that, with the clients really helps. The other thing that, I was impressed with that helps the client understand too is how much opportunity cost is lost by having all their assets tied up in their business, and how much risk they're undertaking. Another good reason to sell a business, the right reasons, not, mitigate my risk, diversify, I can put this money to work elsewhere. And that's what I'm going to look like without having 100% or 95% of my net worth tied up in a business that's not liquid. Those are good reasons why to sell, not I'm just waiting till I'm 65 and I'm going to do it then, whether I like it or not, or, those kind of things where, or I'm not going to sell because it's just not enough.
Right.
That's a great point. And you guys know this better than anybody. Troy and I do a lot of work with the traditional capital markets with stocks and bonds, right? You can buy and sell those any day of the week, any minute, right? It's not, They're highly, highly liquid. That's not true with businesses. And we're in an incredible period of time right now from an M&A standpoint, but we also know that's not always true. And you're right, having like an arbitrary date on the calendar is tough, because if you're in a position where you can get out for enough and the deals, like the liquidity's there, buyers are out there, that's arguably a really good time to go ahead and go through with an exit, because 2 years from now, there may not be a buyer market for private businesses, and you might get stuck for 5, 6, 7 years.
Yeah. And that's what really, that's a great point, because that's what happened, in 2008, and it just cyclically, this is going to happen, and people are going to be stuck in these businesses oftentimes for 7 to 10 more years if they really want to get back to where they want to be, or they're going to make some significant life changes going forward. Because what Troy said, I just, there are many, and I can say many a bunch more times and still not cover it, business owners making $1 million a year in the United States and spending it all. And are coming to the harsh realization that when they get to the end, they simply don't have enough assets to continue that lifestyle. Yeah. And, working with you guys, there's some things that I mean, you obviously can plan for it. You can start to divert some of that income into actual investments that can help to build this nest or these assets that are beyond your business and really start to generate that income. So when people fail to plan, and you guys see this and they come to you and they're like, oh man, I'm selling my business. I'm going to get $10 million, and now this is probably common for you. I'm going to get $10 million. I mean, what are some of the things that you see when they fail to plan, when they come to you at this point?
Aaron, do you want to start?
Kick it off, Troy.
Well, a lot of it is, you alluded to it, Damon. So, they're spending from the business, but, they could have been doing things ahead of time to take some of that income and moving it into entities like a 401, a simple 401k or something like that, something as simple as that, or look at a cash balance plan or other types of entities where you can put the money away, have it grow, tax deferred, and start securing another part of their future, that they're going to need to depend on. And so a lot of them just aren't even thinking about that. I see that often. Sometimes depending on how the business is structured, there's an opportunity right now, even with proposed tax law changes around qualified small business stock. And you have to be a C Corp to be able to take advantage of that. And you have to hold that stock for at least 5 years. And some people who have an LLC and are thinking about maybe converting to a C Corp to take advantage of the qualified small business stock holdings, they didn't wait long enough, or they didn't do that conversion. And so things of that nature are things that I'm thinking about. Aaron, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say that, it starts with, it sounds like a broken record, but it starts with that core number, right? Because they should know that number and be well ahead of that. And by the way, also to that point about spending as well, taking inventory of what actual expenses are, because often, we'll see with, that their business bought their car, pays their cell phone bill, right? And there's these expenses that they need to understand that they're going to have to absorb personally. So I would say starting there. And then from a planning standpoint around taxation and what tax strategy they should be putting in place, because there's just opportunities to get missed, right? If they're in that situation where, maybe they are going to get a deal that will more than fund their lifestyle and they have surplus capital, and maybe something that's really important to them is charity. There's things that they can do, like you can, in a lot of situations, you can donate shares of the company to a charitable vehicle before a transaction. You get the deduction for that contribution, and they can avoid the gain on those shares because it's inside a non-taxable vehicle, right? And that just adds value to the overall deal. So, and again, a lot of people don't know about this. And like QSBS, by example, what Troy was just mentioning, I'll never forget. This was years ago. I was talking with an accountant, and they had a client. They were telling me where they had a client who reached out to them and said, hey, we signed an LOI, we're selling our company. And they hadn't even, that was the first time the CPA had even heard of it, right?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, okay. So they start doing the math, crunching the numbers. They come to find out, so with QSBS, you have to hold the stock for 5 years to get the exclusion. CPA dug into the numbers and basically found out that they set up a closing date that was 3 months in advance of that client meeting the 5-year horizon. Yep. So basically, they would have had $10 million of the gain on that sale come to them completely tax-free, but they missed out on it because they just never talked to anybody in advance of that deal. And those are the kind of things, right? It's just planning ahead. That was $2.38 million that cost them.
I think too that what's really great about this too is with you guys, as soon as possible, it's like, it's difficult to do because the business owner, if he's 3 or 4 years ahead of the exit, doesn't really know what the exit value is going to be, right? So you have to make some assumptions there. Whereas when they come to you late at the end, well, here we've got a liquidity event. We got 10 million or 15 million. What can we do with that? And then the question is it enough, and does it cover all the stuff? And then you're missing out on other opportunities. So that's the part is assume your exit value. Look ahead. It's going to be this and then go to you guys and say, how's this going to work for me too? So what the light bulb that went off was the owners looking at that going, I got this 20 million now, and I could have put it and worked it this way and that way and that kind of stuff. And my risk is way gone, and I don't have employees. I should have sold 4 years ago.
You going to say something, Troy?
Yeah. So there's two things. Piggybacking on what Andrew just said, you also don't necessarily have to assume, I'm going to sell my company for 20, 30 million, because a lot of business owners, they have friends that are business owners. And, my friend just sold his company for 30 million. I can sell my company for 30 million. That, it may be a completely different market. And Aron had mentioned this, they may not even need that much money to sustain their lifestyle at all. And so part of it is early on figuring out, what am I taking from the business for spending that's not going to be there? What kind of lifestyle? They might be able to live off of $150,000 a year. We can quantify that depending on their age, how much money they've that they've been able to save, what state they live in, what their tax bracket is, and all those things, and say, if you continue to spend $150,000 for the rest of your life, you only need X. And then it's like, oh my God, really? I only need X? And so, that part. The other thing that I was going to mention, based, from the earlier conversation is, Aron alluded to it, but, being able to do things with shares of your company, whether it's putting it into a trust, or whether it's putting it into a charitable vehicle ahead of the sale, you could be negotiating with the buyer and you could have a deal signed. But the deal's not going to happen for 6 months, but it's signed, okay? And once you sign, you take away the ability to make some of those moves, even though the deal hasn't been done, because you've signed. And so the IRS is going to say, well, you can't be putting shares of your company into a donor advised fund to get that extra tax deduction. You can't do that because you've already signed it, and so then you lose part of the ability to significantly reduce your taxes in the year of the sale. And so those are just, again, more reasons why just have this conversation early.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you come up with it too. I mean, we were working with a client here a couple of years ago that they ended up in that situation where you said they didn't need nearly as much money, and they didn't want to leave it all to their children. So they were very specific about how much they got. And then they were very specific on how they did that with the transaction for the charity. And it worked out very well for them. There's so many different things that you can do ahead of the transaction, and that's why we want to talk about it today. I think is really to understand your options.
Yeah, and by the way, I'll add something too to that effect about like we make mistakes early on, right? A lot of the mistakes we're talking about are like, are people prepared for the actual exit? The other two is you can see people get too motivated by the wrong things and actually quote unquote overplan. I don't know if that's the right term. So like we'll often see people that will get so motivated by tax avoidance that they will start implementing all these different ideas to avoid taxation to their own detriment. And we've literally seen situations where somebody said, well, wait a minute, the estate tax is how much? Well, I don't want to pay that. So they start stuffing shares of their company into these trust vehicles to get it out of their estate. So that way when they pass away, they won't have estate taxes. And they get to the point of the sale, have the exit, and they actually don't even have enough money for themselves because they put everything into trust vehicles that they can't access. It's for their kids, right? And they're not going to pay much in estate tax. They check that box, but now they don't get to do anything they want to do.
Damon, we worked on a mutual client together that had that problem, right? So before they chatted with me, if you remember, they were working with an estate planning attorney. And to Aron's point, this great tax strategy, let's move, 20% of the business shares into this trust. Oh, guess what? They want to spend how much a year? And they're not going to be able to do it because they've moved their business shares of their business they move too much off their balance sheet, right?
Yeah.
So that's a great point.
Yeah,
exactly. And it is a really good point because it has to be the overall strategy. And that's why looking and working with someone like you guys that looks at the overall picture is so important, because you're going to have tax people, you're going to have estate planning people, you're going to have CPAs that you're going to work with in this process. And you really need to have someone that's looking at the overall and looking at your future, and not just at the level of what I'm doing today, but what am I going to do tomorrow? So when you look at the other side of this spectrum, when people are creating generational wealth, we got a lot of people now that are exiting businesses with 20, 30, 50, $100 million. What are some of the mistakes you see when they do that in transferring that wealth to the next generation? I mean, what are some things we could help people with today on that, just to think about?
Well, I'll get started. I would say, well, you have to talk about it, right? But you also have to have a plan as far as how you go about talking about it, because it like there's I'll never forget. So I'll give an example. So we have a practice group called our Family Engagement Practice. Their sole focus is on facilitating conversations with our most successful clients amongst their family about their wealth, but more importantly, anybody can transfer wealth, right? But how do you transfer knowledge, and how do you transfer values, right? That's a totally different conversation, and that's the focus of what they do. And they'll build educational curriculum. They'll build a curriculum for facilitating these conversations, because if you don't talk about it, that can create a lot of problems. In fact, I will say, with a lot of very successful people, if you kind of boil down their goals to two things, they say, how do I endow my charitable goals? How do I not screw up my kids? And that's what everybody says. And I'll never forget, one of my colleagues in that family engagement practice was telling me the story where they were working with a family who had sold a company for like $120 million, right? Really, really successful deal. And the wife was at home with their teenage daughter, and teenage daughter, was asking mom, like, hey, mom, I know dad sold the business. Like, what did he sell it for? Right. And mom says, no, we're not quite ready to talk about that. And she says, well, come on, I know he sold it. Like, no, she says, we'll talk about it. She says, well, teenage daughter says, well, come on, like, just tell me this. Like, I know he sold it for a lot, but did he sell it for more or less than $1 million? Right. And my colleague says, like, okay, well, that's actually interesting. That tells us two really important things. A, good news. It tells us that your daughter thinks $1 million is a lot of money.
Yeah.
B, the bad news is your daughter thinks $1 million is a lot of money. Right. But that also like gave us the framework for all the conversations that family engagement practice kicked off with that family and with their kids.
Well, you make a great point, because those kids in those situations grow up, some of them not really knowing what money their family has. They think that going to doing this, doing that, whatever they want, blah, 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 you just name it, is normal. And they don't understand what that really means, what that takes to fuel that, what that takes, long term, if they want to continue to do that. And I think one of the things that I really like about what you said, Aron, and I think is ultra critical for business owners that are going to pass on this multi-generational wealth, is the knowledge of how to keep that, how to maintain that wealth. Because how many times do you see people that you help plan, and then they do whatever, and they're not in this income generating mode anymore, other than from their assets, and they're spending too much, and especially in the children. Yep.
Well, it's both cases, right? It's the individual who sold their business, and then it's, if they try to set their kids up for wealth, the kids start overspending. And so there are a lot of things you can do in advance in terms of setting up specific rules and trust, and when the kids are going to get money, and giving you time to educate the kids about the values of, if you're the generation that actually earned the money in the business, what's important to you, and wanting to pass down those values to your kids. But again, it gets so simple down to the basics, is what is that core capital number? I had a business owner who sold his business during COVID. we're still in COVID, but early COVID, right?
Yeah.
Who for $72.5 million. And it was an equity play, a private equity firm bought the business. And so he had a lot of cash up front. We went through the process of identifying his core capital. Great, you set that aside. You know, he had wanted to spend $350,000 a year for the rest of his life. No problem. We moved it aside. You set up the next bucket of, all right, these are going to be the taxes that you're going to have due in the year of the sale. You want to set that aside and don't include it in your spend money, because that has to be there when the tax man comes knocking. And so we set that aside in a very safe, vehicle. And then we've got the surplus. And the surplus is, all right, what am I going to take here to give away to charity? What part of that am I going to set aside for my kids? What part of that am I going to set aside for myself to be able to, buy that yacht and buy that second and third vacation home and all these things? That business owner went through and spent so much of that surplus where they only had their core left. Now they do have a piece of the business, the equity rollover, which they're counting on, but there's no guarantee that's going to have a successful second sale or another event to add to that surplus bucket that they've depleted. So really, part of this family engagement practice that Aron was alluding to is helping these owners and their family members think about that money and the time they've got and what they need to do with it.
Yeah.
Let me share one more thing too that I think is just interesting, because we talk about this idea of the importance of communicating amongst the family and why that communication matters so much. A lot of times that conversation I think centers around this idea of my kids are going to get wealth and I want to make sure that they're responsible stewards of that capital. There's also a flip side to that, and why that having those conversations matter so much. And just it's another story behind this. A colleague of ours was working with some clients where they were working with this brother and sister, both in their 50s, both wildly successful by their own right. And father, they knew he was successful, but dad never talked about anything about what his situation was. And passes away, and brother was the executor. So he steps in to start doing, the estate settlement, finds out that dad was really successful, and the brother and sister were both going to inherit I think 10 or 15 million bucks each. And the brother and sister were ticked. They were irate because they didn't need the money. And now a lot of the planning that they've done for themselves was all thrown up in the air, because now suddenly they have all this, and I get it, good problem to have, but their position was like, look, there could have been smarter things dad could have done with this money. He could have put it into a trust that skipped generation, went to the grandkids. He could have donated it to a charity, whatever, we don't need it. And now we got to deal with it, and it just gets back to this idea of just, having good communication amongst the family so everybody is on the same page. It really matters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I want to add also another point about meeting early. When you realize what is or what it needs to be, meet early enough to be able to talk to people like you guys, so you can actually help them with their business, get it from where it is, where it needs to be. Mm-hmm. And so often thinking about that, people like you who introduce our business owner contacts to say, listen, you want to be here? Well, you got to meet with Damon and Andrew, and they're going to help get your company where it needs to be. You want for that lifestyle, or for that charity, or for wealth transfer. So it's imperative to meet them early enough, because they may not be able to do that on their own. They're going to need to hire someone like you guys.
Well,
that's an excellent point. But it comes down to, it's a chicken and egg thing, right? And we absolutely, the first question we ask a prospective client who wants to sell their business is, why are you selling? And then the next one is, to understand what they want to do after it. But, they don't know what that number is. They need to, with the second thing we do is got to get them in touch with the, good planners who understand the picture, because then it may come down to, instead of finding out at the end, well, we're here, but we needed to be here, which means no deal. That's not, then the transaction's not going to happen. But once we establish what that target is, then your chances of selling are way higher, and you'll get there. You'll get on.
Plus, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, we to Troy's point, like we want to get someone like you guys in front of them early because you know give you a runway, 6 months, 12 months, 24 months to get the business into the right shape where it can sell. Right. Yes. There's always things that need to be cleaned up where it literally adds value. And if somebody says, "Hey, I'm ready to sell, let's put it on the market next week," yep. I'm going to venture a guess a week is not enough runtime to fix some of those issues that need to be fixed.
Yeah. Well, and often the biggest challenge is what Troy alluded to earlier. Their business is making $1 million a year. They're spending $1 million a year, and they go to sell it. It's worth $6 million a year or $6 million, and it's not enough money. They need to be worth 12, 15, 20, whatever that is. That's a bigger problem to keep the same lifestyle. Now, granted, 6 million may be wonderful for them, just a different lifestyle moving forward, but they really, or whatever, but to really understand what they want to do, getting with you guys, talking about that core value, including what they want to do. I mean, I want to do this. I want to be philanthropic here. I want to support my kids this way. There's so many different things they need to consider that they may not be considering today. I just think that if you give yourself 3 to 5 years, you've got options. If you give yourself 5+ years, you've got even more options. Like you were saying, Troy, some of this stuff takes 5+ years vesting with stocks and other things that they need to do to think about early. Now, it doesn't mean that you're going, "Hey, I'm getting out and whatever," but you can do this stuff early so you're prepared. Because the worst part's coming to the end and just realizing it's an OOS moment that I really screwed up.
Mm-hmm. Well, it is once you know what that target is too, that's the key element, right? So you can do a lot in a short period of time to get closer to that number. So if you can fill that gap, but then the next step is once you have the target and you've got a plan to go forward to hit that target and sell it, it may take 5 years, but if you get to that target in 1 year, you have to sell. That's the success to it, right? Because we've already figured out, what we were going to want. When will only because if you wait, then hit that target maybe in year 1 of your 5-year plan, and then go to year 5, you may not be where you think you're going to be.
Yeah, the other thing that owners should be thinking about, they need people on their team beyond an advisor like me or Aron, or advisors like you guys, right? I'll give you a little personal story. I owned a startup company many years ago, and we had developed an app to prevent distracted driving. We didn't have access to the right network of resources at the time to really help us address critical issues around business strategy, around corporate structure, access to financial capital. And so ultimately, we had to shut the business down when Apple, who we had been talking to, came out with their own function that was built right into the iPhone. It's called the Do Not Disturb function, you might know. That was very similar to what we had developed at the time. And so that for many years, that bothered me. And of course, my co-owners in the company. And to my work business centers, I endeavored to create this environment of trusted advisors like you guys, or attorneys, or CPAs, or high net worth insurance representatives, and others who can help with all kinds of different facets of not only the business but their life, and helping to prepare them to get from point A to point B where they need to be. And so, Aron and I have talked about this many times, and we've built our practice to essentially act as the financial quarterback in a relationship. Where we are in a very unique position to early on to offer advice. We're not charging. It's all about this relationship. And then giving these owners access to a whole host of resources that in many ways can be much more valuable than, investment services down the line that Aron and I hope to manage.
Yeah, that's absolutely perfect, Troy. I'm glad you shared that, because, when we go into a situation too, where you have a business owner who wants to sell his company, the buyers come rolling in the door. And guess what? They've got an acquisition team. They have all that. They have their financial people, they have their bankers, they have their attorneys, they have their tax advisors, and next thing you know, you're into diligence. And what do you got on the other side of the field as the seller? It's,
by the way, that's a good point. That's not dismissive of somebody who might be who an owner might have been working with, like their accountant or their attorney. No. It's just that when they get to a transaction, or even thinking about one, it's to their benefit to bring in somebody who has expertise in that space, somebody who's done deals, knows how to navigate that, knows how to negotiate the finer points if it's the attorney, right? So it's not dumping on who they've been working with. It's that they should have the right team around them to get that deal done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and often you have to build that.
It takes time, right? It takes time.
Yeah. Yep. And you guys or like us working with the transactions and in and out, through the transaction process, we build up these networks of people that we've worked with in other deals that we can trust. So we know that we can bring people in and give them that advice that they need. And it is specialized, as Aron said. I mean, there's attorneys that are great general business attorneys, but when it comes to negotiating the finer points of a purchase and sale agreement or whatever you're talking about in a transaction, it's a much different specialty. Right. And that's what a lot of people don't understand through the process is there are lawyer specialties there, and just like many other practices that really can benefit them at the right time, that people like us talk to all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, guys, it's been awesome getting to talk to you about this. And I'm going to thank everyone for listening today. What we're going to do is we're going to go back to the tables for a little bit, talk for just a minute. Our schedule now is we want to have this conversation, talk with people. So, and then we want to be able to get people back. So their next appointment, they're going to be ready to go on that. But before we leave, what's the best way to get a hold of you guys?
Call me, not Aron.
You can find Troy on Twitter.
Troy on Twitter. There you go. All right.
Yeah.
You could just you just go to Bernstein.com. You can talks about our practices. They can call you, Damon or Andrew, and you guys know how to get a hold of us.
Yeah, we can get a hold of you too.
Or LinkedIn, right? Find us on LinkedIn. Our contact info's on there as well, so you can always track us down that way as well.
Okay. Well, Andrew, what are your parting thoughts here?
Hey, this is great, guys. I know we talked a lot, and this seems, this doesn't apply to me. This is really big businesses that are not. But the fundamentals and the message, to plan that far ahead. Applies to every size business, even if you're a solopreneur, to think about that too. So, and it's always good, I think, for us to, at Exit Your Way, to bring some of the stuff the big guys do down to street level where, the small business owner can take advantage of too. So, because it's there, it's all available, but you just got to ask for it in advance.
Yep. Good stuff. Well, I got to tell you guys, I've been through your core value work with clients in the past, and that is one of the most valuable things I've seen for business owners contemplating an exit, really understanding what that number is and how they're going to live after, because it gives them the confidence that if they do the transaction for that amount or greater, they know what they have that confidence in. I'm going to be able to provide for the next stage in my life. And that is when you look at that across the spectrum of why people, stay in their business too long or don't sell, I think is a big thing to a hurdle to get over. Excuse me.
Yeah. I'll add one last thing. You guys have a national practice, right? And so I know you've got listeners on here, maybe following on LinkedIn that could be on the East Coast or somewhere else, not in the Pacific Northwest where we're at. Bernstein is a global firm, right? And we've got 20 offices all throughout the U.S. in the major metropolitan cities. And so whether it's me or Aron, we've got a colleague somewhere else that can, work with someone if they want someone more local to where they are at. But just get a hold of you, it's the right person.
Yeah, and that is the one benefit about you guys being a global firm like you are, and it is easy to find somebody close that they can work with. So,
and it's actually nice because we're an incredibly vertical org in that, like, we don't compete with each other across our org. We partner with our colleagues all the time, all across the country. We know people on a first name basis, and I think every single office around this country. So yeah, it's easy for us to help people get connected with the right folks in another region if we need to do that.
Unlike those other guys.
I wasn't going to say that, but
I'm glad you said that.
I can say that.
Well, thank you so much for being here today, guys. Thanks for sharing some information about this, about, that pre-exit wealth planning, the importance of doing it, the importance of getting at it early. Some of the stuff you talked about 5+ years early. Just let that sink in, and those business owners out there listening, 5+ years early you need to be before a transaction to get some of this stuff to go through and help to mitigate some of the tax consequences and get the real benefits. So we're out of here for today. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with another topic at the roundtable. I want to thank everyone for joining us. We're going to go off here on LinkedIn and go back to the stage on Remo.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Okay. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks.